having a plan. Every week I had a plan built out, and my job was to show up, understand why we were doing what we were doing, and then go execute. Showing up with a plan week in, week out, we got results. What up, world? And welcome back to another episode of the Seeds of Success podcast. It's your host, Colin Walters, and I wanted to follow up with one final bonus episode of the Eugene Marathon, and more specifically, just what actually worked in my training this time around. I'll go ahead and dive into it. We got about a list of 10 things that I'll fly through here. This is for anybody actually interested in running and training for a race and training for a marathon, half marathon, your own training plan, running in general, training in general for endurance sports, or just if you're simply curious to hear what the heck worked during my training plan this time around. So we'll go ahead and dive right into things. And the first thing is that this time around, I hired a coach. This was something that I had always thought about doing. I had always wanted to do. It was that idea that someday when I have enough money to feel comfortable hiring a coach, I was going to do it. Last year, 2022, I spent the majority of it recovering from injury. I finally got through that, and I worked myself into a position through rehab, PT, chiro, like whatever it may be. I know you probably heard this on the previous episodes if you listened, but I worked my way into a point where I was finally ready to start training again. And so this time around, I thought, let's do this thing the right way. So let's hire somebody who has been doing Ironmans and endurance sports and running and training since before I was born. And so I called up my coach who runs our triathlon club here in Corvallis, Pure Endurance. And I asked him to lunch and we had a conversation, and I said, hey, like, I think I'm at that point where I want to coach and I want to work with somebody on putting together a plan to get to Boston, to do Ironman, to start really doing these things. And quite frankly, I really wanted to learn, because that was something that was so valuable to me at this stage in my life and at this stage in my career when it comes to sport and endurance and training, is that I really just wanted to learn, and I wanted to learn fast and effectively, and from people that have been there and done it and been competing literally since before I was born, like I just mentioned. And so figured there was no better time than now to do that. And so it was some big takeaways for me in hiring a coach is we had a plan. Every day, every week had a plan, and it was coming, and there was a reason behind every workout. There was a reason behind every training session and why we were recovering in the ways that we were doing, why we were incorporating the bike on these days, the swim on these days, this speed workout on this Friday, and here's how we're going to ramp things up. And so like the whole plan itself, and me trying to take guesswork out of it, having a plan that was custom and tailored based on his experience, based on his knowledge, was super important to me. And that was something that I loved. And honestly, I just really loved learning. I cannot emphasize enough how much value I found in being able to have a go-to coach that was invested in me as an athlete and as a player, and to be able to pick his brain on why we were doing things the way that we were, to gain new perspective, to have new ideas on things. I love the process of learning. And so that is number one. I hired a coach. And so if you ever find yourself in a position where you are comfortable to do so, do it. It was the greatest investment that you'll make in yourself, or it was, at least for me. Let's see. Number two here, prioritizing sleep. This is something that I think I got away with early in my life, especially like early on in my professional career. Sleep was definitely put by the wayside. That was something that, between the age of, I would say 22, 23, up until about maybe this training bout, to be honest, or maybe like last year at some point, but really in working with John, my coach, his emphasis on getting proper sleep was something that I was really listening to. And then I started diving into, some more research on why we sleep how the body recovers during sleep, how it's a tool to use for recovery to help your body get into the shape and build itself back up through that sleep process that it needs to get to. Not to mention your brain is recovering while you sleep. And for me, my experience was in prioritizing sleep, getting, ideally 7 hours. 8 hours is like still a miracle for me, to be honest, but like 7 to 7.5, I started getting consistent sleep. And I mean, it used to be 4 hours, 5 hours, and I could just go, and it was just kind of what I did. And however, this time around, I just noticed that I had more energy throughout the day. I had more energy in my training plans, in the work day. I've really felt like I had more effective time with the hours that I was investing in during the day. And so prioritizing sleep was a huge one for me. And that's number 2. Number 3, getting properly warmed up. This is something that can often be overlooked. At least for me, it was something that I kind of breezed through back in the day. And getting a little bit older in life, I wouldn't say, that's not the right. I have more years of experience living life under my belt. And with that, my body is not as young and sprightly as it used to be. And so it takes a little bit of recovering. I used to just be able to wake up on, 4 or 5 hours of sleep, sprint out the door, and I was good to go. Like there was, no warm up needed. Now I find myself needing a little bit of time to start getting loose in the morning, have some coffee, start waking up the legs, start waking up the body, start stretching, and start just like easing into my joints and my muscles and everything. And then actually doing a proper warm up. This was something that I took very seriously this time around, because obviously what I was doing in the past with battling those injuries just wasn't working. And so I was very, very intentional on making sure that, I was doing high knees, I was doing butt kicks, I was doing, some like warm up sprints. I was, doing my little leg swinging gaits, whatever you call them, karaoke. Like I basically had this little routine, this little rhythm that I did that was 5 minutes. And it's not like an extraordinary amount of time, but it was 5 minutes more than anything else I had ever consistently done. And that's the key, was doing it consistently. So warming up and getting properly warmed up was huge. And then actually getting into the run itself, warming up still, right? With the first 10 to 15 minutes, 15 minutes is typically where I was like still warming up, like easy, nice pace, getting things going. If I knew I had a speed workout coming, like we intentionally worked this into the training plan. It was written in Training Peaks, in my training plan, to nice, easy first 15 minutes. And then the next 5 minutes actually working in some strides and working to get to, threshold pace and to start having the legs turn over, continue getting warmed up, being okay with stopping if I needed to stretch, to make sure that I was good to go for the workout itself, and then a proper cool down with it. So shutting things down and, 10-minute proper cool down, stretching afterwards, foam rolling, like doing the whole thing, doing it the right way. The mindset that I had was to be a professional. Like that was how I was trying to go about my training process. So that was number 3, getting properly warmed up and throwing in there, proper cool down with it all as well. So number 4, I learned the importance of electrolytes, and I'm going to preface this by saying I am by no means, I can't tell you the science breakdown of it. I keep, I've read a bunch of articles on like sodium intake and, how we sweat. We all sweat differently. Long story short, what I can tell you is that coach emphasized, hey, you need to get more electrolytes in. I started doing that. I started performing better. That is the bottom line. That is what I can say. I would have electrolytes before we did a training session. I would replenish electrolytes afterwards. If there was going to be a big training day, I'd make sure that I would get probably double scoop of electrolytes in there, and just making sure that sodium, potassium, and magnesium levels were topped off. And I felt so much better. I performed better. And this was something that when I didn't actually have the nutrition and electrolytes that I needed during these training bouts, I started feeling that, and I started being able to actually notice these differences. So again, I can't tell you the exact scientific breakdown. What I can tell you is that I started consuming more electrolytes consistently and my performance got better. Number 5 is going slower on my slow runs. And this is something that you hear often in endurance now. You hear go slower on your slow runs, go faster on your hard days. Like, quite honestly, it worked for me. Like, it kept me healthy. It kept me getting an endurance basin on these slower days where time on feet, getting healthy miles in without taking the pounding on my knees, bones, joints, legs, everything. I was able to get the miles in, get the time on feet, and do it in a safe and effective way to continue training healthily and safely, and basically being able to improve overall endurance and overall performance over the long run. Number 6 goes back to one of the first things that I mentioned with Coach, which is having a plan. Every week I had a plan built out, and my job was to show up, understand why we were doing what we were doing, and then go execute. And so I did that to the very best of my ability. And it was just nice having a plan. Like, each day was specifically tailored to what we were trying to accomplish based off of the previous week, which was based off of the previous week. And then Monday's workout was feeding into Tuesday's workout, which was feeding into Wednesday's workout, which was feeding into Sunday's long run, whatever it was going to be. Everything had a purpose, and there was a plan of action that then my job was to show up and go execute on. And so having a plan made things so easy to be able to go execute. And honestly, it was something that I really looked forward to. Like, every Sunday, I really looked forward to checking out to see what the week was ahead. Every night, I'd be checking my training peaks and recapping, okay, what's coming tomorrow, getting excited for the workout, getting excited for the work that we were going to be doing. And then if I had any questions, I could shoot Coach a comment in Training Peaks, or shoot him a text and get some clarification on a couple things. And so showing up with a plan week in, week out, we got results, and it was awesome. Number 7, strengthening my feet. And this is something that, for those of you who follow me on social, you may see that oftentimes I will mow my lawn bare feet. You will see that oftentimes I will walk around our neighborhood barefoot. And it's not to just, it's not to be that guy, but it is because I am trying to continue developing strength in my feet, because what I learned from having plantar fasciitis is that when I started walking around barefoot, it healed everything. I tried the ball, the tennis ball. I tried the lacrosse ball. I tried the frozen water bottles. I tried that super interesting sling looking sock thing that you put on your feet to try to make sure that you're like stretching it at night. And I returned that thing in 2 days. I tried the inserts into my shoes. I did everything. And it wasn't until I said, you know what? I was listening to a podcast with Nick Bear and the, I forget his name, but the gentleman who does like all things barefoot. And it was that in that moment of time, I've always been interested. Like, I've listened to Born to Run. I've read the book. I know about the Tarahumara and the Copper Canyons in Mexico, running barefoot. And I got super into it back in the day. I got my Vibram 5, my toe shoes that Shelby absolutely dreads when I put on. And long story short, though, that is the only thing that has actually helped my feet feel better and help shin splints go away as well. And so I listened to that podcast. I took my shoes off immediately, and I started just saying, you know what? I'm just going to walk around barefoot everywhere I go. And so I started doing barefoot exercises. I started walking around barefoot, and knock on wood. You don't even need to knock on wood. It worked. For me, I have not experienced a single issue with plantar fasciitis since. I have not had a single shin splint since. And I'm not saying that this is going to cure it all for you, but honestly, it did for me. And I just so firmly believe that I think that there is a direct correlation between the strength of my feet and the injury prevention and the health of my feet. That's what I'll say. There is a direct correlation between the strength in my feet and the health of my feet. That's the bottom line. I can only speak from experience on that. So if you're dealing with plantar fasciitis or shin splints, take your shoes off and go mow the lawn is going to be my first recommendation. All right. Number 8 is training with gels and nutrition. This was something that I had not practiced back in the day. I was always a do everything fasted type of guy. Go out like, I don't need food. I don't need nutrition. I'm just going to go freaking do this thing because I can. And end of the day, when my coach John started having me implement like very specific, calorie intake every X amount of minutes on the bike and caloric intake before workouts, after workouts, performance started to improve is the bottom line. And so then I started actually training with gels on these training runs and on the bike, and I had nutrition dialed. I started learning more about nutrition. I actually got super interested into it. And so I did notice that, wow, like the more nutrition, the more electrolytes, the more gels that I was consuming, in a strategic manner, the better I felt during my training sessions and the better my performance was overall. Number 9 is a concept that we started thinking about, which is this concept of floating when I was running. And so basically just trying to think high turnover of the feet, high cadence, and then allowing my heels to actually come up a little bit more to really give myself that sense like I was floating, right? I remember back in the day reading, again, Born to Run, and the quote that always stuck with me was, the best runners leave no tracks. So think about that for a second. The best runners leave no tracks. That's got to mean that you have high cadence, you have high turnover with the feet, right? I almost think like your feet aren't even hitting the ground. They're picking up, they're getting picked up and they're getting put down, right? And so that was the concept that we started thinking about, and was this idea of floating. So think about that next time you're going out running. Just think that you're trying to float. Number 10, last one that we'll dive into for this episode, is I switched up my shoes. Whether it worked, whether it didn't, I don't know. Again, I'm speaking from my experience. I have run in Hoka Cliftons for years, and for one reason or another, I always had some little nagging injury, and that comes with the nature of running, and I totally get that. But this time around, I switched it up and I went over to Nike Pegasus. And so I did my entire training session my entire training bout over the 4 or 5 months of training in Nike Pegasus 39s. And I did very well. I had, until race day, I had no issues to show for it. And I was super healthy all training session, all training round this time. And the hip issue was a totally different story. I got nothing but great things to say about Nike Pegasus. I will continue running in them. It was interesting. There was one day where I switched over to the Hokas for a longer training run. I think it was like a 12 mile or something like that. And I came back with massive blisters on my feet. Haven't worn them since. Back to the Nike Pegasus. I've had no issues. If you're having issues, maybe think about switching things up. Try something new. It takes a lot for me to venture out from things. And so I was just proud of myself for trying something new. It worked. And honestly, I think the Nikes look a little cooler. So it was a win-win all around. So that's what I had for you. 10 things that went well during this training bout. And so I hope that you can go and implement this into your training, your running, your Ironman and triathlon training, or whatever endurance whatever endurance event you are trying to go and tackle yourself, or even just overall health and fitness in general. Or if you're just still interested in hearing what worked for me, thanks for tuning in. I really do appreciate everybody who takes their time to tune in. If you wouldn't mind leaving a 5-star rating and review, it would be super helpful for the channel and helps us reach a greater impact with greater sense of community here. It continues to build. I appreciate you all, and I will see you on the next episode.